It is 7 o'clock, Mr. Phelps, if you wanted to get started.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the Interboro School District Finance GBO Committee meeting, March 8th, 2021 to order. Can we have a roll call, I guess, Ms. Ryan?
Yes, I'll just go through them. Mr. Freilinger, he had a work issue come up, so he is not able to attend. Mrs. Krajewski,
Here.
Mr. Harris,
Here.
Mr. Goldsboro had another event, but he might be joining us late. Ms. Joseph,
Here.
Ms. Fagan,
Here.
Mr. Evans, I did not see Mr. Evans yet. Mr. Chavone
Here.
and Mr. Phelps.
Here.
We do have all the directors joining us this evening, as well as the building administrators, as we'll be doing a data review at the board for the GBO meeting. So at this time, Mr. Phelps, if you want to get started, we're
All
ready.
right. Well, we're going to start with finance. Mr. Chabot, you
Thank
ready to take over?
Yep.
All right.
All right. We have 3 items on the agenda tonight. First up is the 2020-2021 general fund budget. Mr. High School, which document would you like to start with?
I'll probably start with the current year changes from the last meeting to this meeting. The one
Marty, do you want me to pull that up, or are you gonna pull it up?
I have it already open, so. it's up
Okay.
to you.
You can share your screen if you would like. All right.
So this is basically what we usually start out with. The last meeting and this meeting and the increase or decrease from one meeting to the next. Starting out with the revenue, we had some assessment revisions from the county. So that increased our income by about $278,000. Those are ongoing throughout the budget process. So we'll see more of that as we get into, April, May. We had an increase in some local grants and an increase in some local revenue. That's generally, it could be parking lot tax. And we also had a historical increase in our real estate tax certifications. I think that's kind of goes without saying, there's a lot of real estate being sold, money's cheap, so people are buying homes. And generally real estate companies and the loan companies are asking for tax certification. So that number went up considerably. We, unfortunately, based on some webinars that I sat through and some other information that I've obtained, we are being told to budget for certain state subsidies, especially basic ed and special ed subsidies. We're being told right now to budget using 1920s numbers. The governor has a big push that he wants to increase special ed and basic ed, but he wants to offset that by increasing personal income tax. So there's going to be a struggle in the House and the Senate throughout this budget process at the state level. So we're right now being asked to be conservative and budget for 1920 because it's possible we won't see an increase this year for basic ed and special ed subsidies especially.
Marty, can I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
So you said the 2019-2020 numbers. Why not the last year's numbers?
For 2021, they don't have the formulas set yet because they don't have the based on all of the components that go into the formula, the latest version is 1920.
Now, what is the rationale for using those numbers? Like, obviously, there's a negotiation back and forth, but what is that just them saying, this is worst case scenario?
Yes, and 1920 is that's their last formula that they could apply. They consider that to be a hold harmless type of number. So if we use 1920 basic ed subsidy and special ed subsidy, then that's the latest complete data that they have.
Now, your projected number for February 1st, where did that 25 million come from? Is that just a standard increase?
Yeah, that was basically using last year's 2021's basic ed and special ed without an increase. So as you can see, we had a considerable jump from using 1920 to 2021's numbers.
Yeah, that decrease is wild. Like that's
Yes, that's it. Yeah, it's
tremendous.
now, there are certain optimists out there to say that there will be some increase. It's just that the governor has to kind of find where he's going to take that from if it's not personal income tax. And I've, over the last several years, I mean, they've always found some money. So I'm fairly optimistic this 1.4 million, it might come back and we can recoup maybe half of that, depending on how their budget appropriation committees
Depends
are
on when, because,
working.
we have to pass our budget, and they can't, we have to pass our budget and they can be playing around up there while we're trying to figure this out. And come June, they decide to say, we are already finalizing our numbers by then.
Well, and when his first year in office, actually a couple of years, and some of the administrators, and I know Mrs. Riley and I had, he didn't pass a budget till way after June 30th, the first year or so. So he's known to do this, and this is his final 4-year term. So basically, you could see that where they won't do this till the 11th hour, till the
Okay.
final moment. So we as business managers have been asked to kind of just budget accordingly and be a little conservative, just in case that increase doesn't come to fruition. And I know there's a lot of districts that got hit pretty hard with having to do this, or to the larger districts.
Yeah, I have my legislative meeting Wednesday, so maybe they'll talk about this. Maybe I can get some information about it.
Yeah, I'm on an email loop, and I'm keeping my eyes and my ears open. So hopefully this will turn around during their budget process.
Okay. And Ed, if you hear anything from the DCIU, let us know.
Yes, yeah, PASBO, PSBA, and the IU, they're all kind of keeping us informed in the loop, so to speak. So the whole thing resulted in about $1 million reduction from our meeting in February to current, unfortunately. So any other questions on the revenue? Okay. I have sat down with Mrs. Riley and Dr. Criscolo, and we went through the resignation and retirements, and I adjusted the personnel based on some of the agenda items of hiring and resignations and so forth of the different collective bargaining units. And we saw a reduction based on the retirements, resignations of approximately, of that 505,000, 539 of that was the result of resignations or retirements, and then replacing with teachers that make a little bit less, because you've got your high-end teachers that are retiring, obviously. So, so we did see considerable savings here for some of these retirements. But also the benefit, the salary, the benefits of 505,000. That's based on second look. I generally budget about 5%. This go around, the first look and the second look were the same. They didn't change, and they were a 2.9% increase. So that adjusted that somewhat. In addition to that, the retirements kind of helped with lesser in retirement costs and so forth. So we saw about I think that would be roughly $885,000 in salary and benefit reductions based on majority of that being retirements and resignations.
Marty, I got a quick question. Even though we have the retirements, we will be we replacing everyone that's retiring, do you know, or?
Of the ones that I have currently, there's 10 employees, and we did replace them.
So wouldn't the benefits kind of stay the same? I know the
benefits-
salary.
Yes, the benefits could stay definitely stay the same, and some of them do go down. Now, a lot of these teachers that are retiring, they've been around a long time, so their benefits are normally husband and wife. So really,
Okay.
I use a husband and wife to replace, because that's kind of the middle of the road between single and family. Where we see the big change is the salaries and also the appeasers, the retirement.
Okay, thank you.
And there are other retirements that are coming down the road, but we haven't, obviously we'll see those in next month's meeting. So there are still some savings to be had out there. The final look, the IU did approve their budgets on March 3rd, which was last Wednesday. I'm not sure if that'll be on our agenda to approve those as one of the school, the school districts now need to approve those as well in the county.
Correct.
Yeah, all right.
So there was an increase in early intervention services, and there was also a slight increase in special ed services. Now, we did see a decrease in VOTEC, and that's just kind of cyclical. That's just based on the number of kids that sometimes you have a large number of kids, some years you have a smaller number. So we did see a small decrease in the, like I say, special ed, and then the VOTEC went down by about 58,000.
So
Where we're seeing the huge increases is early intervention services.
I just had a question about that. Like, what, can I have some examples of what that means? Like, is that something that we maybe in the future can do in-house? That's a big chunk of money right there.
No, I think Mrs. Riley can jump in here. And that's basically program services for 4-year-olds, and we don't really actually even see the names of those children. So we don't really have anything to do with the servicing piece.
It's early intervention. All early intervention is through the Delaware County Intermediate Unit. We do not provide any of those services. So we also aren't informed of who those students are because they're not school age. So we base it on the budget that's presented to us, the amount that's presented to us through the DCIU.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, we do get a number, and it's kind of taken off in the last couple of years. So it's
Do
increased
you
somewhat.
have any accountability over that money? Like to know that we don't get names, but do we get student A costs this much money or?
We get a breakdown. We do get a breakdown of services they receive, but that's about all that we get.
Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's limited control over that on our end.
Okay.
So no, that would basically, that's the final number for the IU. So that should remain unchanged going forward. The curriculum and instruction, it's obviously a large number that jumps out at everybody. However, of that 460,000, based on what I've received from Dr. Eckman, Dr. Averill, about 403,000 of that approximately is going to be pushed into the ESSER 2, the $1.9 million grant. They just haven't worked out all the details and so forth. So that 460,000 is a kind of a big number for a department, but about 403,000 of that is going to be pushed over into the grants, and they will discuss that at their budget presentation in April.
Nice. So we could go on the assumption that all the deficit numbers on the bottom most likely will be reduced by the 400,000 from the grant money. That's nice.
Yes. Now this is kind of a big number as well, but it went twofold. It came out of revenue and came out of expense. The revenue, I pulled it out last meeting, this meeting, and sitting down and looking over the grants. The $490,000 grant, that was a PCCD grant that we used for the PA systems and some other security improvements that we made throughout the district. So that you won't, of that 666,000, 490 of that is the PCCD grant, which we hope to spend by the end of this year. So you won't see that obviously in there. We had a DCD grant that could be spent by the end of the year. The Boeing grant, we had about 140,000 that we carried over. We spent a lot of that on some devices and so forth. We have not heard back from them concerning any grants for next year at this time. We could eventually, but Dr. Eckman, Dr. Averill said they haven't really heard anything as of late. So that reduced that local grant line item by about 141,000. And then some adjustments to IDEA, pass-through monies, and some other smaller grants, local grants. That was an increase of about $9,500. So we saw a decrease in that of $666,000 from our expenditures. And the ESSER 1 grant, we put that into 2021 because we knew we were going to get it back in the budget process of the spring of 2020. So that has come out because we've spent that money. So of the 466,000, 441 was the ESSER grant for 2021, and that was just kind of a one-time deal, so we won't get to carry that forward, obviously. And then we had some adjustments to federal programs. I usually reclass increases in salaries and benefits for the teachers that are in those grants. So we just moved that up to the salary line item. So that, and every year we get a slight increase every so often from the federal government, but it kind of doesn't keep up with our increases for salary and benefits for teachers. So that's why you see a reduction in there, about 25,000 coming out of there to go up to the salary and benefits line item. That just means less for supplies and software and so forth. And then there was some minor software adjustments and so forth for technology for about $2,600, which is minimal. So the bottom line there for the expenditures is we reduced those by about 1.5 million. So all that being said, the net effect from one meeting to the next was about $458,000.
Okay.
To the good.
Yeah.
Our deficit went from 736, as you can see, to 277. So obviously we're heading in the right direction. It's just, now we're waiting for the state for those subsidies and so forth. And then we will circle back with some of the department heads, some of the directors, to see if there's anything else we can do to tweak some of their budgets.
Marty, have we received the ESSER 2 money yet? Has that,
No, that's you load that up into e-grants, and then it's similar to Title I, II, and Title IV. We file quarterly cash on hand reports, and what will happen is they'll start to reimburse us based on those reports. And
Okay.
generally they'll divide it by 6 to 8 payments over the span of the grant. And I believe this is a 2-year grant. It's up in 2023.
Can you, when we get those, can you just notify the board, or just so we know when I know you discussed what we want to purchase with them, but just you notify, because that was passed in December, we're now in March. And then with the potential of this new round of ESSER money, I'm not sure if anyone saw, but it's another 128 billion they're putting in potentially for K-12 schools. So the first round was 13 billion. We got almost 500,000. The second round was total in the country was 52 billion. We got 1.9. Now they're talking about 130 billion. Just doing it progressively, we might get another $4 million, and I don't know what that's necessarily used for, but we just got to keep our ears out for that money and when that's going to be allocated. I'm sure we probably won't get it for this budget, but just if you get updates, I would appreciate you passing along. I know we get the PSPA updates, but if you hear anything from your business guys.
We haven't really seen anything on that yet, Justin,
it's
but
been-
yes, as soon as we get something, we will definitely send it out.
Okay.
We're
Yeah,
it's
anxious
been
to
very
see
limited.
we're anxious to see that as well.
Yeah, it's been limited information concerning that, other than what we're allowed to spend it on, obviously.
Okay.
But we do, I know Mr. Son, Dr. Ekman, and others, Ms. Lambert, they've been working on that 1.9 to where they're going to spend it, when they're going to spend it. So some of that 1.9 could end up in this 21-22 budget,
Okay.
if they can't spend it all before June 30th, which I don't believe that will happen. There's a lot of money.
Thank you.
It's really tied. We'll focus on that grant during the tech curriculum
Yes.
budget discussion next month.
Do any board members have questions for the changes? This document, the changes from last month.
I'm just glad to see we're moving in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Now this is at 3.5, just
Don't get ahead of the game with the expenditures and the revenues. There's always some type of hit. We would be sitting pretty if we didn't lose, the 1.3 million in revenues
yes.
from the state.
Yeah.
I think that's going to change
Yes.
somewhat.
Yeah.
It's a little conservative, but you want to
I
look at
guess-
the impact with the various tax increases?
So I'll see if I can everybody, let me see if I can. I know it's really small, very hard to read.
More?
So here, this is a lot. I fit this one just to talk about. Then we can go back to what it would cost each household. So you can see from left to right, if it's a zero tax increase, you're about a $1.8 million deficit. And if you move up to the 3.5, which was on that other sheet, about 278,000 would be our deficit.
And right now, like you said, with the curriculum, we could subtract 400 from all those bottom lines right now, right?
Yes.
Because we know that's coming
Yes.
from the money.
So so we'll meet with that department between now and their presentation in April, and you'll see a significant decrease in that, or decrease in the deficit or increase in surplus. So we are currently, our budget is 2.65 for 2021. So if you were to kind of maintain that, you would see in column H that it's about $645,000, $44,000 deficit. So yes, theoretically, you could take about 400,000 off of that, so you would be around 244.
Okay.
That's just based on, we do have to get together with them and tweak that. It might even be that we would budget more, but we'll have to wait and see in the next couple of weeks when we meet.
Now, for a March finance meeting, we are definitely moving in the right direction. Quicker than the last couple of years we've been doing this.
Yes, I think the retirements help, obviously. So we're, that's a big deal for a lot of school districts.
Now, Marty, can you go to the one where it has the tax increase, or the tax increase and there you go.
Yes, this would be, yes, there we go. So as you can see, for a 1.5, 0.5% increase, it's about $67 a household. If you went to the 2%, it's about 90. So roughly 1% increase is roughly $45 a household. So, and if you're looking at, like I said, 3.5, that's 156, obviously. That goes up, and that's based on the average fair market value for reassessment of non-commercial properties.
And as Mr. Phelps pointed out last month, these are based on the new reassessment values.
Yes. Yes, that would be, as you can see, the on line 5 there, in line 5A there, that's about $157,000. That's average reassessment for residential households in the school district.
Okay. Questions? Marty answered all mine, and I asked all my questions. Any board members have any questions for Marty before we get into the specific line items for special ed and facilities?
Do you know offhand, Marty, how many more retirements we might be getting?
No, Dr. Criscola, he had thrown out 2 or 3 more, but they're not official. So really, we don't have a good number.
Okay.
We do have potential for some, which is encouraging for the bottom line. But yeah, it's kind of, I think they're coming in a little bit at a time, and he does give us a heads up.
All righty. Thank you.
If you give me all a minute, I'll pull up the presentation.
Marty, thank you.
No problem. Thank you. All right. Yeah, and I want to say thanks to the board. I appreciate you moving this meeting to the 8th.
No problem.
Couldn't do without you, Marty. Who are we starting with? Special ed? Facilities? Okay.
Yeah, we'll start with facilities. Just give me a second here. All right. Mr. Galloway, if you would like to just go through and highlight.
Yeah, so I'll talk about the decreases that occurred. 2620, you see that decrease. There were a couple increases with utilities in there. Decrease in equipment improvements, $58,240. The net decrease with the increases for repairs and maintenance, and the utility increase, which was a sewer update from one of our buildings. So we have a $50,786 reduction coming into the next year. The other decrease was $4,600 on the bottom there for building improvements. We had projected plans to do some work in the guidance area and the main office, and we've deferred that for the time being. But that gave us a decrease of $9,500. Some of the increases there on 2630 and 2640, all those increases are actually in regards to COVID-19. We didn't get any real funding for that in our department. So you have some additional supplies for disinfection. And then we had quite a bit of repair work that was a result of putting up things like plexiglass partitions for the secretaries. Plexiglass is like clear gold right now. It's hard to find. We just had to go 3 states to buy plexiglass the other day for some additional partitions that were requested. So that's where the increases come from there on 2630 and 2640. One of the things in 2620 that we've used less energy, in particular electricity, in all our buildings, with the exception of the high school. When we started doing evening sports in December through February now, the energy consumption has tripled at the high school as a result compared to the other buildings. So we've made a lot of, even running our equipment at 80% more than we typically do by pacing that equipment for increased air circulation. The costs have been reduced in every building, with the exception of the high school. And that's mostly due to the antiquity of it. I think that's about it. It's a pretty uneventful budget this year. For the total savings for this year will be $39,546.
Question.
I had a question. Mr. Harris.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Schoen. Mr. Galloway, can some of these increases be offset by the CARES Act, the CARES money?
That money was exhausted. I think a lot of that funding went towards devices, boards in classrooms, technology mostly. If we get a second go around, but I wouldn't really see it. We shouldn't see any increases. We're doing as much as we possibly can with our disinfection practices going on all day long in the buildings, and then using the electrostatic sprayers in the evenings. So I wouldn't see it going up or down, really. It should stay pretty static where it is right now.
Thank you.
I had a question, 2 questions, Mr. Galloway. On the line item for equipment, operation of equipment services, are there any, big items that are getting old that we should be looking at budgeting, or, I know we purchased the van, like things like that may come up next year that, maybe you're putting on the burner right now, back burner right now, because we don't want to increase the budget, but are there things that we should be looking at on the horizon?
We will see probably equipment failures at the high school. Some of that monies that you're seeing there is for repairs of HVAC equipment at the high school. Again, due to antiquity and due to the fact that we've basically increased the load 80% on that equipment throughout the district. But because of its age, we're going to see more repairs occurring there. We do have 2 vans left from the initial 5 or 4, I'm sorry, that will need to be replaced. And that's something we've been discussing with Mrs. Riley and Mr. High School about how to fund that right now.
Okay. And then you sort of alluded to it. The impact on the HVAC, how, at the high school and district wide, is it in pretty good shape? I know we were concerned back in August, was it capable of doing what we needed to? And starting September, who knows if we still need to run it at the same efficiency? Like, is it in good shape? How much, wear and tear do you think is district wide?
Well, we are running it above, it can run at what it is, but when you look at the projections from the ESCO when you purchased, there's a lifespan, but it's running at that energy savings settings that they want you to set it at. Which is what we've been doing for the last 3 years, and certainly have really reduced our energy usage overall. It was kind of unique. I was not expecting to see the decreases in every building. I track it every month, and we are averaging between 12 to 24% decreases from the same times last year. So that was a little surprising. Like I said, the only one that really went up was the high school, and that was a result of running that equipment extended hours and on weekends as well. And that's something we never did before. We're running that equipment in the evening and on weekends to have that air circulation when the student athletes and the coaches are in those spaces. We couldn't not run the air. What we always kind of relied on was a little residual heat or air conditioning in spaces for those few hours after we curtailed our occupancies for after school events. But because we need the air circulation, we're having to run. So we will, certainly the expectation will be that, we could see some more mechanical failures. We have increased the maintenance, the preventive maintenance side of things to occur during the run times rather than in our off seasons, which has always been the case. So that helps in preventing failures. The high school is not surprising to see, only because of the age of the equipment.
Thank you.
Another question, if I may, Mr. Chavone? Mr. Galloway, is this something that we should be looking into if we get any more monies from the government through this COVID money to possibly replace or upgrade the high school system?
Obviously, that would be ideal. I think we need more discussions as far as, a renovation of the mechanical spaces. You could potentially use some of that COVID relief monies for this.
Well, it's directly affected by that. I mean, so it would be covered.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't think it's out of line. I just, again, as a, sit down with Mrs. Riley and Marty about,
Be part of the overall discussion of the renovation
to
project and how that would be considered as part of the overall would be the HVAC. It also depends on how much we get and the timeline to spend it. But Definitely part of
Be-
future
It's
discussions,
something that
Mr. Harris.
Yeah, we should be looking into a cost to see what it would be to replace and or upgrade whatever the
Yeah.
situation would need. Because I know we've discussed the high school air system a couple of years now.
Yeah, we've been working on that with a presentation coming next month. We have been working with the engineers regarding the high school. So that'll be coming up next month.
Okay, thank you.
In reality, the repairs, I mean, when you see, $5,000, $12,000, in the grand scheme of it, we do a lot of the work ourselves, rather than go out to our contracted vendor on that. We only use them for the biggest items that we're really not technically able to service them. So it really has not been as bad as I would have predicted. So that's not really bad with what we have going on up there.
All right. Any other questions? Mr. Galloway, were you done with your presentation?
Yeah, I'm done.
Any other questions for Mr. Galloway? Okay, Mr. Galloway, thank you. We know that you do a really good job at trying to keep what we do allocate for your department under budget. Looking at the last audits, last year came in under budget. You do a good job, tightening the belt as the year goes on. So we would expect nothing different this year. Thank you.
Mr. Schmidt, we're going to move on to special education. So I'm going to turn it over to Rachel, Ryan, and Paul. Not sure. Rachel, are you leading that discussion?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Ryan and I will be discussing some highlights today. The first slide you will see is going to be about our tuitions that we are paying currently for our out-of-district students. And the second slide will concentrate on cyber and charter schools and what we are doing currently preparing for the 21-22 school year. Ryan?
Yeah, so this first slide, like Rachel had said, is our tuition comparison from the 2020-2021 school year to the upcoming school year that we're anticipating for next year. For our approved private schools, we are anticipating a savings of about $300,000 in tuition and other services, and that's from students graduating and or some students coming back into districts. Now, on the other end, there is an increase in our private school tuition, and that is primarily driven by two main students, as you can see there in the private school tuition. However, some good news moving forward, both of those students have changed placements throughout this school year, which is going to be a cost savings for next year. The settlement agreement, we had a settlement agreement in previous years for a student to attend another placement. That is ended and that student has returned to our district. And we have had some involvement with attorneys throughout this year so far, but we have been doing a really good job of working closely with the families to address any of their needs. And there have been no new settlements at this point in this school year. And we hope that that can continue on to the next school year as well. The last thing you'll see on the budget there is the cyber charter schools, and that is what Rachel will talk us through on our next slide.
I know cyber charter schools has been a topic of conversation this current school year, understandably, with all the changes due to COVID. I do know that there is an increase, but I do want to explain it a little bit further. Historically, cyber charter schools have always been a fluctuating attendance. Kids come, kids go. This year, we did see an increase, which we did expect to a point. The remainder of the students who previously enrolled or moved throughout the district are enrolled in outside cyber programs. And I would like to draw your attention to the bottom graphs. 12th grade students this year, there are 10. So 10 students will be graduating from our cyber charter tuitions. Students who started in the 2021 school year were 34 students. 20 of them moved into the district already attending an outside cyber charter school. 20 of them, I can say, had been contacted, and due to the fact that they were comfortable with their setting, they did not want to change. Having said that, I do make it a commitment to continually talk to those parents throughout the year, build relationships with them, and you will see in the next slide what our plans are going forward. 10 students. And I think that this is a tremendous effort on the entire team here. Only 10 students left Interboro to go to an outside cyber school district in the change of everything that occurred this year. And just working with other school districts, that is a very low number. And that is a lot of effort due to our cyber administrators and the cyber programs that Interboro created over the summer. So I do want to give, a shout out to those teachers and administrators for creating those programs and communicating them in a timely fashion to our parents. Scotty also goes out and does a residency check for our cyber charter enrollments because we do find many times that there's, a glitch in the paperwork or what have you. So we do not pay any tuitions until a residency check does occur. And you'll see on the next slide, thank you to Kaylin, who had created our brochures and marketing for the virtual academy for the 21-22 school year. They are currently being printed and they will be hand delivered to every one of our outside cyber families. I will attend along with whoever would like to join me as we would like to bring these people back. I do have commitments, I like to call them, from 10 students already for the 21-22 school year. So now it just is that extra hand to say, like, I will help you with registration. As registration is a cumbersome piece, but if they know that there is somebody they can count on, we will definitely do that. There are, in addition to postcards, there are flyers that will be posted in all the school buildings and those sent out. And if you see the QR code, that QR code is for parents to take a survey to start gathering our numbers to prepare for how many parents want to continue in the cyber programming for the 21-22 school year. All right, and the next slide, you will see some proposed positions that will also help decrease going forward our budget.
So one of the proposed positions that we are asking for is an autistic support teacher at the high school. A couple of years ago, there was a position created at Prospect Park for an extra autistic support classroom due to bringing some students back to district, as well as increasing numbers of students who needed that support. Those students are now basically in 8th grade. And they are ready to attend the high school. So now that they've matriculated up, we have a recognized need at the high school for another classroom specifically for some of those students. One of the benefits of that is since it is a first-time position and it's newly created, we would be able to use some of our access funds to pay for that position. So it wouldn't be in the necessary salaries and benefits of a line item budget for the expenditures that Marty had talked about earlier. Another one is a more intensive life skills elementary classroom teacher. As you saw, I know Mr. Chavone, you asked a question about the early intervention students. We have some more early intervention students coming in to our district that are going to require some more intensive life skills than we currently offer. This will prevent some students creating this position, would prevent some students from going to some of those outside placements, and it would also open up the door and some spots for students that are currently in outside placements to come back. We have life skills classrooms at Norwood. However, to jump all life skills students into one bunch isn't really fair in certain grade levels. So we do recognize a need that there is a need for a little bit more intensive life skills classroom for some of those students.
With those added positions, related services would also have to increase in order to support those students. Generally, autistic support students and life skills students require additional speech, sometimes 5 days a week. So we are asking for a 0.8 speech teacher to support the additional classroom needs. Again, with that being a new position, we are able to pay through that through access. In addition, I'm happy to say that the diversity of the district is increasing with our English language students. Currently, we had, with your permission, we hired our English language teachers this year, and I'm happy to say that has been an excellent program, and it really has bridged the gaps for some of our families into our school setting instead of going through the IU. With that being said, we have currently a 0.6 teacher that we would like to move to a 1.0 next year, especially since we predict that most of our students will all be back in person and it would be too difficult to service all of our students. And so we're going on with access as they are being paid, we wanted to give you an update on our access on the next slide. Jackie Shanahan has done a phenomenal and continues to do a phenomenal job of getting funds for the district. COVID did present some challenges for us as we weren't able to bill as much. Having said that, we continued to build all through COVID. So as we were able to gather logs or gather tuition payments, we were able to continue to bill. So our current amount in our Interboro account for access is $417,000. Our average monthly revenue is approximately $2,000. That was higher last year. Just to give you an update, we had a meeting this morning. Last month, we only collected $8,000. This month already, we are collecting $13,000. So as we continue to get more students back in the district and as we continue to provide services in person and on a more consistent basis, that number will continue to increase. Our revenue from the 18-19,000 school year, again, we still have not completed one full year of access, believe that or not, with the idea of COVID and Jackie starting later than normal. Even with the 18-19 school year, not a full year of billing, we did manage to produce $309,000. Our revenue from last year was $152,000. We do not have all of that revenue as it takes some time for the cost settlement to come. So as we will get that, we will update the board. And our current revenue, as I said, is a little bit lower than we expect, but we are automatically seeing increases each month that we attend school and more students come to school. Our anticipated revenue is $85,000, but now with ESYs opening back up to in-person, we will probably see a slight increase in that as well as we are able to bill for services through ESY. So Jackie Shanahan is an amazing resource for our families as well. Completing the MA or the medical assistance forms is a very cumbersome task. If anybody has filled out a FAFSA form, taxes, it's much like that. And you do need assistance, and her patience goes a long way with our families. And so I just wanted to say thank you to the board for your continued support on that access coordinator, because she is, many districts do not have them, and we are obviously seeing the benefits of having one. Are there any questions?
Okay.
Mr. Bowles, you want to go first?
No, okay.
So I appreciate the presentation. It was really good information. I was trying to follow along with the line item budgets. The pupil services one, where it says regular instruction, it was decreased by 458,000. Is that those first two slides that you were showing with the cyber charter, and is that what that all encompassed?
Yes.
All right, good. My question about the pupil services budget is just the fact that last year it was 1.4. We're decreasing it by a total of $542,000. Obviously, that deals with a lot of charter school tuitions, but you know, I get concerned with the special ed department in general because it fluctuates all the time. So, is decreasing it by 542,000, the pupil services specifically, are we putting ourselves in a jam at all? Is my question. Dropping it that low.
Marty might be able to answer this a little bit better, but I always know that Marty knows that the budget fluctuates on a yearly basis. So he always makes sure that we have the just in case fund, I like to call it. So just in case a student moves in, or just in case we have something going, Marty is prepared always. And he works with us diligently to make sure and to see if we know of anything. So that's why he does like to know who's graduating, so we can know if, you know, is there going to be a huge light item missing? Because one student graduating sometimes is $100,000 difference.
Yeah.
So it is important for us to keep a track of that. I will say the other department that we work very closely with is the transportation department. Anytime that we can close a bus down by putting 2 students on a bus, or making sure, you know, closing a rundown by saying, can this student do AM here and PM here? Bill Bierman is fantastic to work with, and that really does cut down on savings. In addition, Mr. Snyder and I do complete the contingency fund. The best way I can describe that, it's like a coupon. You try to register for it, and you can only apply for students who cost more than $100,000 for the district. So we did complete that in December for 3 of our students. We do not find out if we receive the money back until May. So we will let you know.
Okay. That I think was it for the pupil services. Now, was that the both line item presentations? Can I ask about the special ed line item as well? So the where the autistic teacher that's paid through Access and then the .8 teacher paid through Access, where was the life skill classroom and the EL teacher, was that paid through Access as well? Okay,
We cannot pay English language through Access. Access is special education only funds. That would not be considered Access. The life skills teacher will be paid from the district funds.
okay. So if you look at the autistic support line item, it says increase professional development by 64,000. Is that the autistic teacher position?
That would appear in salary and benefits. It wouldn't appear in Rachel's line item.
Mm-mm.
Is that where you're looking, Justin?
There was a couple increase in professional services, and I was just curious what those professional services. So in the deaf and hearing impaired, there was increase in professional services 51,000. Autistic support increased professional services 64,000. Multi-handicap support increased professional services 27,000.
Agencies, Rachel?
Yes, they would be nurses and agencies. So for our students, professional services would be nurses and or hearing support is an outside agency that we work with. Orientation and mobility, vision services. We do not have enough students to hire our own, so we outsource for those services.
Okay, yeah, I was just trying to
Yeah.
pinpoint what you were explaining. So those 4 positions that you discussed, are they assumed in the budget that Marty already presented, or is that what we would have to add that in?
You
Added.
We did not include them. They're
Yeah,
not
have to be added
included.
in, yes.
Okay. And is there any way we can get like a 1-page document that just shows how Access money is spent? Because I know we've talked about positions before with Access money. So just so that 309,000 X, Y, and Z position.
Yeah, Jackie Shanahan does a quarterly summary basically where it lists out what all those funds are being used for. So we could definitely provide that to you guys.
Yeah, they would be good to share out with the board.
Okay. I think that was it. Do you have a cost breakdown of what the life skill teacher / classroom person would be and the EL teacher would be? Do you have that? No. Okay.
That has not been worked out yet. We'll have a better handle on that next month,
Okay.
Justin.
All right. I think that was all of my questions. Mr. Phelps, you're up. If you had one.
Teacher that you were talking about?
You were frozen a little bit, Mr. Phelps. Can you start over?
Yeah, the .8 position. That's for special ed, for reading. Is that what it was?
It's a speech teacher. So with the creation of that autistic classroom at the high school, as well as the life skills, the more needy life skills classroom at our elementary school, a lot of the times those students come with speech and language needs. So that .8 position would help fill in some of those needs for those students.
Now, is it just the high school and the one elementary school, or is that all the schools?
We will, the schedules are not completed yet, but that teacher would be able to help out in multiple locations, and that is the plan for that teacher.
That's what, like .8, I mean, wouldn't
Yes,
it?
so we have been grateful that our speech teachers have all been trained in Linda Mood Bell, which is a very intensive language support program. In the past, I'm going to say years ago, we used to send our students to language support classes. And since they have been trained, we were able to bring back all of those students. In addition, we have been able to support many of our needier students in reading and language through our speech teachers. So we are grateful that all of them have been trained. So this teacher will not be a Linda Mood Bell teacher, but she or he would be able to pick up some of our articulation off of our other teachers' caseloads so that they would be able to continue the language support.
Well, my gist of it is, like, is there a big difference from .8 to like a full-time Like,
No, I will never say no, Mr. Phelps. I'm all
well,
in for a
I'm like,
1.0. I'm
how
in.
much are we saving from like to 0.8 it rather than just say, I know we got to have enough needs in our district that we could probably go with a, 1.0.
Dave, did you
Mr.
want to
Chabot,
say
may I-
something?
Yeah, quick comment. To what Mr. Phelps is saying, just from a recruitment standpoint, if we want to get the best candidate who's out there, many people will not accept, a 0.6 or a 0.8. When you're a 0.8, again, I'm not here to spend the board's money, but if you're looking at a very small amount of money to go from a 0.8 to a full-time person, there's no
Right.
difference in benefits because they already
That's-
qualify.
I guess that's my question. What would the difference be from a
Right.
0.8 to just a full time? And I don't hear nothing.
I
Well,
would, I was gonna say, I do not know specific salaries. I would probably say the teacher would be a brand new teacher. And we have been extremely lucky with our speech teachers. They are phenomenal. So it would probably be a starting salary if I had to guess.
So like from a 0.8 to
You're probably looking at
0.8
going you're probably looking at going, instead of paying 40,000 for a salary, going to 50,000 for a salary. So you're looking at about approximately 10,000 in salary. And then obviously Mr. High School can give you specifics on the minor impact of PSERs and other taxes with that. But I think you're looking at, approximately $15,000 would be the difference.
Well, I'm just, naturally, believe me, I want to save as much money as we can, but I want to get the best bang for our buck. And I feel as though for that little bit more money, would probably be more beneficial to go with a full time and spread them out throughout the district.
And much easier to recruit a high level candidate just from an HR perspective.
I
Right.
fully support your thought process, Mr. Phelps, and I'm so excited. for it.
That, I can't even believe what I'm hearing.
Well, because it's a minute amount of money and the benefits,
Benefit, right.
that's,
There
So-
will be a major benefit from it. You
yeah,
are
so
correct.
myself, I would, that would be my recommendation. I don't know how the rest of the board feels about it.
Well, let's
can
take a
start.
straw poll.
I'm okay with but with the caveat, I want to see all four of the positions broken down, next month.
We can have more information on that for next month.
A 0.8 to a 1.0. I don't
Yeah.
think it's that significant. Compare if it was a 0.5 and a 1, and yeah. But-
Right, that's a different story, but we're so close. I don't think it's going to be that big of a difference.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that.
I agree.
Rachel's very happy.
Very much so, and so
I
is.
always try to make Rachel happy.
Thanks, Mr. Phelps.
Hey, she saved us a lot of money on that pupil services budget.
Yes, she has.
Team effort. Team effort.
That was my only thing.
Okay.
I'm done. Okay.
Harris, you have a question about special ed?
No, I'm fine, Mr. Chabot.
Okay. Mr. Evans, you're unmuted. Did you have a question or just, okay.
I'm good. No.
All right. Ms. Krajewski, Ms. Fagan, Ms. Joseph, any questions on the special ed? We're gonna be-
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay. All right, so if there's no questions, thank you guys for your presentation. Again, as I said to Mr. Galloway, you guys try, do a really good job trying to get the kids to come back into our building, making those relationships. I think that's the biggest key with special ed is having those relationships with the families to get them to come back, to come to our, get our education in our building. So keep doing a good job. And yeah, just if we can have like a sort of a one-page document on access, what, you said the total amount, but just what each thing, where that money goes, and then just cost out those four positions so we can see the impact next month on the budget.
Will
Okay?
do.
All right, the next item on the agenda is the preliminary financial statements. They were on board docs. Any questions? All right, hearing none. Any general finance questions or general finance updates, Ms. Riley, Mr. High School?
Not at this time.
I do have one question,
Mr. Phelps?
Mr. Chavon. Rob, this is probably for you. I could not get the, I don't know whether because it was confidential, I couldn't forward my email off the district to my home so I could print out the budget information for some reason. And usually I'm capable of doing that. Is there a reason why I couldn't do that or?
No, there shouldn't be. You should be
Okay.
able to forward it.
All righty.
I mean,
I'll,
there's a lot
I'll
of
keep-
documents.
yeah,
It might, because there's a lot of documents, it might have been too big of a file.
Yeah.
So,
okay. All right. All righty. That was my only question. Thank you.
all right, Ms. Riley, any members of the public have any questions? You're muted.
No, there are no members of the public.
Okay, at this time, we'll end the finance meeting. Next month, we will have more line item budgets. All right, we'll go right to GBO. Mr. Phelps, I don't think,
Glenn's not, didn't get here yet. Okay,
No.
I'll go ahead and take care of it, I guess. We will call the GBO to order at 8:01 and the finance. We will be number one, update on district data. Ms. Riley.
Yes.
I-
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. I'm going to turn it over to Mark and Val, who will lead the discussion. We've been working with the administrative team, building administrative team for the last few weeks in preparation to present where the district is with our achievement and growth data. So ahead of time, I'd like to thank the administrators, the whole team collectively for putting this together. And I hope that the board, will be pleased with what we're going to share with you this evening. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mark and Val.
Hi, good evening. So tonight we're going to share with you our current academic performance, really measured by research-based assessments. And overall, what you will see is that the hard work, creativity this summer of planning the different models of getting, 70% of our kids in school in September, and then also the endless hours of preparation and planning from our teaching staff has, for all intents and purposes, has allowed us to maintain the same academic performance as previous years. And in some areas, actually increase and exceed last year's performance. So just to start off, I'm just going to share with you some of the national trends in terms of how school districts across the country are performing. We give the NWEA's MAP assessment 3 times a year. This is a nonprofit research-based organization that has over 1 million students that take this assessment on a yearly basis. They have throughout the pandemic have produced predictions on how students are going to perform and for educators to anticipate COVID slides or learning losses. They had an updated prediction that was issued in the fall. And you can see this first slide in math. What it shows is that essentially by schools and students who are experiencing a COVID slide, a learning loss caused by the impacts from COVID, would be performing not even where they were in the previous year, several points below. Similarly, the same thing was predicted for reading, and this was based on assessments that were given in the fall. Furthermore, they compared scores from students performing in, you'll see the left-hand side of the screen is math, the right-hand side of the screen is reading. And you can see in the 2 images on the left-hand side, you can see that the difference between students last year and then students moving into the next year, you can kind of see that the students that are gaining, students that are maintaining, and the students that are sliding in their performance levels. You can see it's much more dramatic for those who are in math, but reading has experienced similar pieces. So we've used these national trends as a basis for us to, one, compare data, examine any learning losses that we have, look and find learning gaps, but also examine the trends and impacts of new elements such as becoming a one-to-one school district, having to departmentalize elementary in order to have cohorts, implementation of new programming, all of these things in order to see what the impact has been on learning for the school year. So overall, for our district data trends, some of the things that we are seeing this year at the midpoint of the year is that differences in academic gains between in-person students and students who are learning synchronously, asynchronously. There's a difference in the younger grades, but that gap narrows as it gets to older grades. We also saw that new programs and pilots that we had this year supported the goals that we wanted, such as Orton Gillingham and an increasing phonics performance, as well as piloting Bridges Elementary math program to increase algebraic concept proficiency. We also saw that our growth from the fall to the winter was higher than typical semester growth that we've experienced in previous years. So our students from the fall to the winter experience greater growth than they have in previous years. We also saw that we surpassed the predictions of where a school district would be with a COVID slide or a learning loss. And then also that the winter 2020 scores, last year's scores, and how we were performing last year versus how we're performing this year is predominantly the same. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ekman now, who's going to look at specifically some of the comparisons.
Sure. So these charts that you see here just give you an overview of our 1st to 8th grade students, and then some students in special education at the high school. These students would have had to take both the winter assessment in the 2020 school year and the winter assessment this school year, so that you're looking at the same group of students. Overall, what you'll see is that this green and blue, which is where we want our kids to be advanced and proficient, we want our students to be there, that we are maintaining and in some cases increasing. But the biggest piece is that there's not a significant disruption in students' achievement levels. So what you'll see here is if you compare, for instance, number and operations that is listed as A, that was given in January 2020, to then numbers and operations listed in B, which was given this past January. So you can see that those bars are essentially measuring out the same, and similarly, you see a similar trend with algebraic concepts as well. Interestingly, we have 3 goals that we pulled out here in our MAP reading scores. Again, we have about 1,700 students that we're looking at for this data. So you have to look to see the winter 2020 score for the particular goal, which is listed in the A lines, against the B goal, which would be our January 2021 scores. And you can see there that overall, despite everything that has happened with COVID, overall, our students are minimally maintaining and in some areas even exceeding what was happening last school year in January of 2020.
Okay, so the next slide is going to be our overall enrollment for our 2 new programs for virtual, our iSync and our iCyber programs. If you look at the yellow, that is our in-person population for each of our community schools. The grayish blue color is our iSync population, and that rust color at the top is our iCyber population. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Spina.
So similarly to what Ms. Farmer presented, this is a look at the 7th to 8th grade all program enrollment. So we're looking at out of 100% of students at each school, where students are distributed. You can see across the board, it's very similar. There's a few more students in the iSync and iCyber programs coming from Norwood, but otherwise it's pretty generally similar across the board as far as the percentages of students enrolled in each program. This is a look at our 9th through 12th grade overall enrollment, and you can see that we do see an increase in cyber enrollment. That's our asynchronous program, as we look at the grades getting with the older students as they increase. So we can see from 9th to 12th, we do see an increase there, as well as a decrease in the iSync. So it's, you know, our 9th grade students are more likely, if they are in the virtual environment, to prefer the iCyber. Our 12th grade students are more likely to prefer the, or rather to prefer the iSync. Our 12th grade students are more likely to prefer the iCyber. And you can see across the board, the hybrid enrollment is pretty consistent grade to grade. And then finally, this is a look at our iSync iCyber enrollment from October to March. So this is a look at any changes in enrollment that we've had. You can see that the orange represents students without IEPs. That gray represents students with IEPs. So as we look, we can see that there was a 13% decrease in enrollment in our iSync iCyber in grades 1 through 6. There was no change in grades 7 to 8. While we did have some students swap in or out of the program, there were no net changes there. We do see a 7% increase in enrollment in iSync iCyber for grades 9 through 12. So overall, there's a decrease in by 12% in students with IEPs who returned to in-person learning and perhaps some different in-person supports, and an overall 6% decrease in the iSync iCyber enrollment. And I'm just going to introduce Mr. Kohlhepp to discuss the Pre-Kindergarten Early Learning Academy.
Thank you, Ms. Spina. Good evening. So what we're looking at here is in the fall when our pre-K students from last year entered here at the Kindergarten Academy, we had 41 students who carried over from our 3 pre-K classes last year. And if you look at the pre-K students are the blue bar here, students who were part of our pre-K counts cohort from last year, even with the early ending in March, you know, when they did have to pivot to a virtual setting for the rest of the year, pre-K students that we had traditionally scored higher than every other child in it who entered kindergarten as well in the fall, pretty significantly. And that just goes as a testament to how strong our pre-K program is here. This is just obviously one snapshot, but Dr. Ekman, myself, and Eric Patterson and the teachers are digging deeper as far as looking at our pre-K achievement over time. Next slide. So our goals for the pre-K for this spring, we're continuing to improve upon our transition from pre-K to kindergarten. The way we're doing this is we have a team of kindergarten teachers and our team of pre-K teachers are coming together. We're going to dive deeper into the assessments that we see in pre-K and how are they correlated with the assessments we also see in kindergarten. We're also going to look deeper into the curriculum, our PBIS programs in both grades and how they're connected, and also our social emotional learning curriculum is the same in both pre-K and kindergarten, but how they build upon each other. The pre-K, big day in pre-K is no longer after this year, so the teachers, Dr. Ekman and myself are previewing possible new programs for the 21-22 school year. And also we have some students who are truly flourishing in more ways than one. We always talk about the social emotional growth that we see in our pre-Kers, but this year in particular, we're seeing some really strong academics more than even in the previous years. So we're going to try to figure out how to best meet their needs and differentiate within the classroom and possible some support outside of the classroom. Next slide. Looking at the Kindergarten Academy, a lot of bars here, I know, but if you look at the ELS, and that is their emergent literacy survey that they take in the fall. If you're looking at the blue to the red, you see the fall from 2019 and then the fall to 2020. As you would expect, due to the COVID slide, the children coming in this year were not significantly, but fairly lower achieving than they were last year, which we expect. As that being said, since they are coming in lower, they are also, when the winter assessments came around, not scoring necessarily as high as we would like them to be or in a traditional year. However, what we have seen is if you look at the percentage of growth from one year, from the fall to the winter, our students this year are making tremendous growth more compared to any other year. Few reasons for that. Most importantly, obviously, as what Mr. Abel said earlier, the implementation of the Wharton-Gillingham program and the phonics instruction occurring each day. And it's very specific, and with that hour-long instruction, we truly are seeing the benefits of that. Letter naming, as you see here, looks concerning. However, it's pretty typical for this time of year, but 25% of the students are 1 to 2 letters away from being proficient in letter naming. And to be proficient in letter naming, that is identifying all 52 uppercase and lowercase letters. So again, looking to the spring, as those gaps continue to close from fall to winter and then to spring, I don't think there's going to be much slide at all from this year. Looking at, again, this is kind of what I just talked about, looking at the percent increase. So the blue is the percent increase from fall to winter from last year, and the red is the percent increase from fall to winter for this year. As you can see, other than the concepts of print, which we're definitely going to look into why that data looks a little bit different than the others. Tremendous increase compared to where they were in the fall. So we're definitely impressed with how the kids are growing so far this year. Looking at math, this is what I'm most impressed with for our students. Looking at our math scores, there was actually not a slide at all. Rather, our students' test scores increased from last winter. This is part of, as Mark said, the idea of the new math program Bridges being introduced this year for our kindergarten students, as well as also, as Mark said, the idea of departmentalization and how that's benefited, in this case, in particular, our students for math. So if you look at our RIT scores, if you look specifically at our teachers that are teaching Bridges, it's close to, a little over 2-point increase. And that's, even with the COVID slide and everything else that we talked about last year. So definitely impressed with our students. Next slide. And looking to the spring, we definitely, with the departmentalization, there is some time lost in a traditional literacy block. However, what we have, with the help of Mr. Patterson, has been honing in on that hour and how we can best utilize it. And in particular, how to implement writing intentionally. Also, we're beginning to examine data as a team. So it's the Wharton-Gillingham teachers coming together to look at data, ELA teachers coming together to look at data. It's really not separate, but it's really curricular based and focusing on the programs to dive deeper into what's working and what we can continue to improve upon. We also are utilizing RAS Plus. This kind of gives us, even in a COVID world where we have 14 students in a classroom, 6 feet apart, staying at their desks. Obviously, it's not a traditional year where they're coming to the small table and having small group instruction. We are able to utilize a program on a tablet, which does give the teachers the opportunity to still have those small groups, albeit looking different than most years. But they are able to meet the needs, academic needs of the children due to this program. And also looking in the spring, we're looking to a specific home connection plan. What can parents do at home? There's not a big focus on homework really ever at the kindergarten in particular, but there's always things that we encourage parents to work on with their kids. This year it's been not as clearly communicated, meaning that what we want to do is come up with a specific plan. And after having these fall and winter data now, what we can give back to the parents as far as this is what you can do to help your child come ready for first grade. At this time, I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Patterson, who's going to talk a little bit more about literacy here in the early grades.
Good evening, everyone. So just to focus on the ELS, specifically in grades 1 and 2, the ELS, like Mr. Kolopitz said, connects to the Wharton-Gillingham portion of our literacy time for decoding, providing explicit instruction on various concepts, and is new in grades 1 and 2 this year. Early returns appear favorable, as you'll notice throughout that data. There's growth across all assessed areas from the fall to winter. I'm going to specifically focus on 2 aspects of the ELS very quickly here. One being the OG word recognition, or words that need to be memorized because they can't be sounded out phonetically. They don't follow specific patterns. And then the pseudo words, which are essentially fake words that do follow a phonetic concept though. Okay, both these aspects of the coding tend to be challenging for our students and highlight the need for the OG approach, which explicitly teaches patterns for mastering the red words and various phonetic concepts. Orton Gillingham as an approach is especially important to supporting our students' ability to master specific phonetic concepts connected to the pseudo words, which you've noticed on the right-hand side in both, well, actually in both grades 1 and 2 is our lowest area of growth. So it grew, but still at a lower area than we'd want. And ultimately, so to grow this area, we're going to continue our focus on an explicit and enhanced instructional focus of Orton Gillingham. And with that approach, we should observe some greater gains come the spring round of assessment data. Now I'm going to turn things over to Mrs. Costa, Assistant Principal at Norwood.
Okay, thank you. The first grade MAP reading assessment focuses on 3 areas: the foundational skills. These are the skills that students need before they can become fluent readers. It focuses on reading and writing and language, which is conventions, capitalization, punctuation, and spelling. So in first grade overall, they demonstrate a lot of growth in the area of reading, and foundational skills is an area of focus in the spring with an emphasis on using Orton Gillingham with fidelity. Second grade reading, there 3 categories in this assessment are reading informational text, vocabulary acquisition and use, which is when students recognize and understand word relationships and structures, and reading literature. So we'd like to highlight that our second graders overall made a lot of growth in vocabulary acquisition and use. And therefore in the spring, an instructional focus will be on reading comprehension with informational text and literature. So next is Mrs. Boswell, and she's going to talk about math data.
Good evening. When we looked at the first and second grade math data for MAP, we focused on the growth from fall to winter. And the areas that we really highlighted in first grade were the algebraic concepts. They made significant gains from fall into the winter. And then for second grade, we really focused on the numbers and operations where they made a lot of growth, but we then analyzed the data and were able to come up with some focus areas for our spring. And it also goes back to some of the other administrators when they talked about the piloting program of Bridges. It really showed that the kids are really doing well with the program and making gains. So some of the focuses that we want to move forward with is numbers and operations in grade 1, and in grade 2, algebraic concepts and measurement. But we also wanted to analyze the fact that they are first and second graders. So they made a lot of growth, and that a lot of these topics in MAP, they don't necessarily dive deep into until the spring. So we anticipate a much bigger growth from fall till spring. And I would like to turn it over to Ms. Farmer.
So once again, just to reiterate what Ms. Costa and Ms. Boswell said, for ELS, we want to make sure that our focus is on continuing to do fidelity checks. We want to continue classroom walkthroughs with building administrators. We want to continue focusing on OG with fidelity. Focusing on pseudo words, which are nonsense words that follow phonetic patterns, and OG word recognition. For ELA, we want to make sure that we're focusing on small group instruction based on readiness levels of the individual learners. We want to focus on OG with fidelity to translate into ELA or reading. And we want to focus on reading comprehension in both first and second grade as a focal point. And like Ms. Boswell stated, for math in first grade, we want to make sure that our focus is on numbers and operations. And in second grade, we feel that we could get the most growth with algebraic concepts and measurement and data. At this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Ms. Cubito.
Before we move on to data for third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, I just want to see if there's any questions from the school board members before we move on to another set of information.
Mark, would you say that the reason we're seeing so much success and not much of a slide because our kids have been back 5 days a week since October, would you say that is the number one? Yes, we could say the OG curriculum or the Bridges curriculum, but could we, definitively say that it's because our kids are back in the classroom?
I would say that's a big part of it, right? I think there's a number of factors that go together. I think, to be honest, one of the biggest pieces is the amount of time people have put into planning and preparing lessons and instruction for students. And I think that we have so many students that are in person and have been in person since September is a huge reason.
Have you looked at, I know this is third grade and fourth grade overall, but compared third grade in person to third grade, if they're virtual?
We have done that. We have done it at a district level and at a grade level. And so one of the things that happens is that in general, the distance between learners closes as the older the students get, which is to be anticipated. Yeah. But that also means that in terms of with MAP and using that as a primary tool, is that students in the younger grades also experience more variable growth and larger chunks of growth as well. So that's what the focus of looking at what we're going to focus on for the spring, because we expect that those students will be able to make up that ground.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to walk you through the third through fourth grade reading. As with the second grade test, the third through sixth grade reading, the categories are reading informational text, vocabulary acquisition and use, and reading literature. As you can see, third grade made great gains in both the reading of the informational or nonfiction text and reading literature, which is our fiction text, and also had great gains in vocabulary acquisition and use. Fourth grade made the greatest progress in the area of the vocabulary, in the reading of informational text. And when we look at the fifth and sixth grade, fifth grade, again, had a large increase in the reading of informational text. And sixth grade, the gains aren't as large because once we get to sixth, the higher grades, there's not large increases. They don't increase as many points throughout the year, but you can see they still made good gains in all areas. And overall, we see the trend of the vocabulary acquisition and use being a strong point across the grades so far. And with that, Mr. Fanning will walk you through the math.
All right, thank you, Ms. Covito. So with regards to math in grades 3 to 4, it was very positive again to see growth in all 5 strands district-wide from the fall to the winter. I think if you look at grades 3 and 4, we saw some of our highest growth and achievement in the areas of algebraic concepts as well as measurement and data. In grades 4, we did see some of our lower achievement in the area of geometry, but I think that's important to note that that's something that kids haven't been exposed to too much so far, and that's something that becomes much more of a priority as we move into the spring. And that's also going to be part of our spring focus moving forward. If you take a look at math in the 5th and 6th grade level, again, it's encouraging to see growth across all 5 of the strands district-wide from fall to winter. In grades 5 and 6, we saw some of our largest gains in achievement in the areas of algebraic concepts as well as numbers and operations. And kind of following the pattern that I just mentioned, you'll see that geometry is definitely an area of need. And again, it's something that becomes prioritized as we move forward. And again, it definitely will be something that we focus on in the spring. And I'll turn it over to Ms. Stubbe to talk about that spring focus.
Thank you, Mr. Fanning. So moving forward for the spring, as we looked at all that data, we noticed a couple of things we're going to focus on. First off, for ELA, we're going to try to incorporate more TDA or text-dependent analysis to improve writing. That's a format of writing that really dives deeper into the text. We're also going to make sure that we increase the exposure to informational text moving forward. And as well as making sure that students are engaging in that writing process across content areas to make sure that they're understanding, explaining, and analyzing. In math, we're going to, as Mr. Fanning pointed out, get to more geometry concepts, especially in the upper grades there. We're going to focus on numbers and operations practice in 3rd and 4th grade to really improve our fact fluency. And we're going to focus on data and probability practice in 6th grades in particular. One of the tools that we're going to be able to use to help especially will be this platform called Ixl, which is an online program. And we know that teachers are going to be able to have some targeted focused areas of need for students or groups, as opposed to just reinforcing the topics that they're currently teaching as well. So it's a great tool that we really hope to increase the usage of. And I'll turn it over to the 7th and 8th grade team.
Thank you. Good evening. Mr. Mills and I will be walking you through the 7th and 8th grade data. We'll start off with the 7th, 8th grade reading assessment. If you look at this, you'll see that the results, they do seem a little flat. When you compare the overall, looks like we're losing ground, but if you look at the subcategories, categories are the same as we've been talking about for the last several grades. We see that the real focus is in the reading literature area in both 7th and 8th grade. That's where our students actually look like they lost some ground there. It is important to note, however, that when we dig deeper and we look at this information, we can see that 2/3 of all the students whose data we're looking at did meet or exceed the projected growth, or fell within that standard error where we did witness growth for them. So 2/3 of our students there did make that growth. Moving on to the language results, we see some gains all across the board. The overall in both 7th and 8th grades is going up, but in both cases, when we look at an area where we see the least amount of growth, if you will, or an area that we definitely want to increase some focus, that would be in the writing area. Moving on to math, Mr. Mills. So if Mr. Mills is on, I'll just talk to you about the math results here.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
sorry, I was on mute. Sorry about that. Good evening, everyone. As previously was discussed, some of the other administrators, you can see growth in math across all 5 strands. Some of the areas you just want to highlight on, we saw significant growth in overall and algebraic concepts, moving from grade 7 and in grade 8. We also like to talk about in geometry as far as the scope and sequence, and we'll talk more about our focus, but geometry not being taught as much yet. We need some work in 8th grade. I also just like to say for 7th and 8th grade, as other administrators have alluded to, Ms. Cabito spoke about, was the amount of growth that you see at the later grades in 7 and 8 is not as high as in some of the other lower grades. Thank you.
So looking at our spring focus in the area of reading, similar to what you heard before, we definitely wanted to incorporate more of the text-dependent analysis to focus on some of the writing skills and really help our students develop their skills of synthesizing the meaning from their reading. Some independent reading of literature. Again, we saw that one area in the reading where that was a relative weakness for what they're doing, so we want to focus on that. And overall, we just want to see more opportunities for engaging students in the writing process and helping them to develop their writing skills.
And in math, we're going to increase the use of the Ixl tutorial program to target specific areas of need, and also adding focus on our geometry and how much and when it's presented.
And one more thing, this is based on some feedback from a lot of the teachers, and this might be something that's more specific to our 7th and 8th graders, and that is incentivizing our students keeping their cameras on. In talking to the teachers, we've already been working on this, and we're seeing really great return on that. As the kids are keeping their cameras turned on, we are seeing that they're being more and more engaged in that lesson. The kids are seeing each other, they're responding to each other, they're responding to the lessons, and they're just really staying engaged. So we're going to continue to look into more opportunities for the spring. Now that the kids are used to what they're doing, they're really in the groove. We want to get them into that deeper engagement, really more involved, and it's definitely showing, and it's looking good. So hand it off to the high school.
So before we jump into the high school, I just want to pause again to see if there's any questions from school board members for information presented for 3rd through 8th grade.
Mark, just real quick overview. What is Ixl? What is that program, or is that something you could just say a blurb about? I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, so Ixl is a program that we have that allows for teachers to assign specific learning questions practice to students based on where they're performing. The way that it works best is that if there's a 10-15 minute benchmarking that is done each week for students. It then recalibrates where students are and then allows the teacher to assign specific areas and topics for them to address. And it kind of works on a scale where you get a certain number of questions and it increases in rigor as you move up through those questions, but allows the teacher to see what students are proficient in those standards and which students are moving toward mastery, but allows for a differentiation. And also for this year, it is really helping us monitor any gaps that need to be filled and where our major learning targets are being met and not being met.
Okay, thank you.
Mark, I did have one question. The reading for the 7th and 8th looked a little bit low. Is there a plan or of action that we're going to be implementing, or do you have any ideas what we can do to improve that?
Yeah, Mr. Phelps, I can take that question. So there's kind of two things to keep in mind as it connects to that 7th and 8th grade reading data. One is kind of nationally speaking, has been more of a trend towards infusing more informational text than literature into reading at the secondary level. But as we now have come to learn, across the board needs to be more of a balance. So one of the things that we've done as a district to account for that this summer, I sat down with a team of middle school teachers and we revised our middle school reading curriculum, something I'm very proud of. But in doing so, you notice that reading literature was one of the kind of the lower aspects of assessment data in those previous slides. One of the things that I think counts for on our end is that we've kind of, by altering our curriculum for middle school, we've shifted literature more towards this second half of the year. So I think now that our students are kind of up and running and being exposed to more literature, you'll see greater gains in the spring. Right. The other piece that we're working on is the writing and really the analysis through writing too. That's another focal point our teachers are currently working on as well.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. Sounds like you're on top of it.
Could I just add something as well?
Yes.
When you look at the spring scores, all grades are still 7th and 8th grade only need to move like 2 or 3 points to get to where they're expected to by the spring. So they are on track to meet those spring numbers.
Okay. Well, I was, look, I'm not that knowledgeable with some of this stuff. I'm just looking at the charts and everything looked fairly good except for that one. It looked like it was. So that was why I'm asking.
Good question. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Mr. Johnson here. I want to be speaking about the data sources that we use at the high school. And this is a 9 through 12. So what we're looking at is our from 9th grade all the way to 12th grade for regular ed through special ed students. And we start off with one as a CDD, or the Classroom Diagnostic tool, which is a set of online assessments that we use. That's divided by the content areas, so literacy, math, and science. And it's designed to provide diagnostic information to guide and the instruction in order to support intervention and enrichment. We also give our students the PSATs, as well as, that's a preliminary SAT, or the National Merit Scholar Qualifying Test as well. That measures what you're learning in school to determine if you are on track for college. Our students also sit for the SAT, and the new test is more focused on the skills and knowledge at the heart of education. It measures what you learn in high school and what you need to succeed in college. Our students also sit for the ACT, and the purpose of the ACT test is to measure a high school student's readiness for college and provide colleges with one more common data point that can be used to compare all applicants. We also administer a MAP test for our special ed students, and it's used to measure students' progress or growth in school. It indicates a student's strengths and the areas that help the need in any specific areas. We also administer the KTA, which is the Kaufman Test of Educational Achievement, and that measures such areas as math, reading, written language, and oral languages. We also incorporated this year the weekly average report for our teachers' classroom grades. That's pulled right from our eSchool, and that also is sent out every week to review with our teachers throughout the school year. And part of the ATSI plan, which you're going to hear about in a little bit, is we've also increased the FaceTime meetings between our students and our counselors. With more information about the ATSI, I'm going to push it over to Mr. Litz.
Hi, good evening. So this is the second year of our ATSI. We've had presentations before to the board about our role and our planning in this endeavor. So this concerns our special education students. We have to make sure that they're meeting certain goals each year for achievement, attendance, and graduation rate. So again, this is just special ed students. When it comes to the achievement piece for the ELA, we do use the CDTs, as Mr. Johnson mentioned a minute ago, to track their progress against the Keystone exam. So the anchors and goals of the CDT are aligned with the Keystone, and it's our best measure to track student growth towards proficiency on the Keystone exam. And so each quarter, we look for students to decrease the gap between their baseline and their target of proficiency. So we didn't have students this quarter, special ed wise, be able to close their gap by 33%, although there was some growth. We're hoping that now that we're moving into the spring and we have opportunities for students to engage more with their teachers each day, that will be a big push to help them in their ELA achievement. For Algebra 1, we did have students, thank you. We did have Algebra 1 students take the CDT as well. Again, this is students with IEPs. They did choose the diagnostic category, the teachers, for their second round of CDT administration this year. So we have dabbled a little bit into specific smaller versions of the CDT that help us really pinpoint where the growth is happening. So for the second quarter, we did have 40% of students with IEPs showed increase in their Algebra 1 score when it came to these specific topics. And next, for attendance, our goal was to make sure that less than 51.5% of students with disabilities had 9 or more absences by the end of quarter 2. We hit this mark both quarter 1 and quarter 2. We have about 40% in January. Students with disabilities had 9 or more absences. So we are hitting that target that the state put out for us. And finally, we needed to make sure that 80% of our students with disabilities, our seniors, were graduating on time and had that final graduation rate in June. We started off a little bit lower as things got going in the fall. It's picked up a little bit to 66%. So we're still off the mark when it comes to these students on track for graduation. But we decided that just one student failing one course for one quarter would mean that they're not on track. So there's still time for that student to catch up and make sure they graduate. And that's what the big push is now. So even though we're at 66% in January, you know, they may have failed one course in the fall. They may have just passed in quarter 2. We deem that as not out of the woods yet. So we're hoping for a strong quarter 3 as we track the progress of these seniors to make sure that we get over that 80% mark for graduation. And Ms. Ford?
So the high school spring focus, we're hoping that in the spring that we can help with more student engagement between the students and the staff. So some of the things that we're going to try to utilize here is we're going to implement opportunities for students to Zoom with their class on their alternate class days. And we're going to use the Promethean boards to make that happen. So we'll continue to utilize the coaching from the DCIU to help us with those Promethean boards. A couple other programs that we are focusing on at the high school are 2 programs that will help our students who are struggling or might need a little extra attention or some more support. And one of them is what we call the Study Cafe. And the Study Cafe runs from 12 o'clock to 2 o'clock, Monday to Thursday. And the students can go and get their lunch, and then they can come back into the different rooms. And there's counselors there, there's teachers that come in, and the students basically get one-on-one attention and actually can just sit there and do their work if they feel that that environment's the best environment for them to learn and to get their work done. We're also instituting the Bucs Program, which stands for Believe or Because You Can Succeed. And with the Bucs Program, it'll run from 3 to 5 in the afternoons. And in that program, we're going to look for students who need some support, not necessarily just straight with their academics, but maybe in getting themselves organized and figuring out what they're supposed to do, how to manage their time and get everything working together. Once they get that together, then obviously their grades would pick up from there. So we have support students in organization of schoolwork, including navigation and use of technology tools like Schoology, help them complete their schoolwork and find supports, and engage students to increase motivation through mentorship. And it acts as a liaison between parents, teachers, and counselors. Thank you.
With all the success of the data that you have seen tonight, it does not go without a team of people behind making sure that students are attending school on a daily basis. This year has presented some challenges for students who come on a daily basis, whether it might be that they got confused in the beginning of the year if you're a middle and high school student on an A or a B day. Some of our elementary students were not in the swing of things coming back to school in September, and we continue to work with families reestablishing daily routines. So the social workers, the administrators, and the deans from the high school this year have completed over 130 home and school visits. In a typical year, we probably would have had 20. So we do understand that COVID has presented new challenges. I'm happy to say that they are making great relationships with the families when they visit, and we are seeing absolute changes from that. We also have had to utilize some of the police at times for well checks for families. If we have felt that we've gone a few times and we haven't received any response, the police have always been there to support us. Building SAPEs. SAPEs are student assistance attendance meetings, basically. That's what they stand for, student assistant meetings. The social workers in each building have completed over 100 of individually scheduled meetings collectively. So that is a one-to-one meeting. So a social worker, usually an administrator, possibly a teacher, as well as one parent and their child. And that is to help them reestablish daily routines and bedtime habits. We are finding that a lot of children are not going to bed on time. They're up gaming, texting, social media, whatever it may be. So sometimes just establishing where the tech goes, even our one-to-one devices sometimes need to go into parent bedrooms at night so children do not have access to them. When that does not work, Mrs. Riley is a huge proponent of truancy and definitely helps us. She schedules district SAFEs. 28 of them have been scheduled. I would say there are top tier 4 families, if you will, families that we've needed to come up with extensive resources and interventions with. So these are habitually truant students and families. The goal of the meeting with Mrs. Riley leading it is to determine the obstacles why students are not attending regularly. From that, sometimes program changes are recommended, whether you might have been a sync or a cyber student, they come into class, or it might be something you were a hybrid student, A, B, and now they're attending 5 days a week. Also, other intervention and outside resources are given to families. We have a great relationship with Child Guidance and Holcomb and through Crozier, so that if families need therapies of whatever, we are able to provide that resource to them. And I'm happy to say, again, with the help of Mrs. Riley, Truancy Court will be starting back up at Interboro School District. And this time it will actually take place at the boardroom. So Judge Lippert is moving Truancy Court from the court for right now due to COVID to the boardroom starting in April. He and I have been working on cases and prioritizing who will first be seen in April with the help of the administrators and the social workers. And so all of these interventions and supports being built in are why you see the success you do through the data. Are there any questions for any from our last stop point?
Yes, I have a question, Ms. Lambert. What about missing students? Because I've read a report where some school districts are actually missing students, don't know where they've gone, where they are, how to get a hold of them. Do we have any missing students?
We currently do not have any missing students. We have students who I will say we had to work very diligently to find, but we do know where every one of our students are. And I'm happy to say that we have made a contact with every one of our students. Some are slower to build into a daily routine, but I will say the daily, sometimes there are daily home and school visits that are occurring for some families, and they are getting the students back on track.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the administrators from the board?
No, I would just like to compliment them on their being so thorough. It was a nice presentation. Good job, guys.
Yes, I would like to thank all of the administrators for taking the time to put this together. I think it really does show how hard we have worked since last summer in preparing for this upcoming school year. And I believe that being able to showcase all that we have done and how our students are making progress with challenges definitely says a lot about all that we have done. And this team has stepped up tremendously in putting this presentation together, and all the work that they're doing and the time they're putting in with their students. That truancy piece, I can't say enough about the deans who have taken this on as their mission to do these home visits and check in with families who are really struggling right now, and being able to, connect and offer opportunities for kids to change programs, get services. That personal contact and that connection really does go a long way. And everybody on this Zoom from the administrative side does take the time to reach out to parents, stay connected. That is the key. Being connected to our families and our students is really the key to our success. So I do want to thank everybody for that. Our social workers, our guidance counselors. I think everyone has really just done an amazing job under these circumstances. So thank you everyone for your time. It really is a testament to the work. And that's really all we had this evening, Mr. Phelps, was an opportunity to present that data.
All righty, we appreciate that. Is there any questions from any of the board members? Any questions from any
Mr. Evans,
administrators?
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Phelps. Mr. Evans had his hand raised.
I can't even see Mr. Evans, so thank you.
Yep.
Go ahead, Mr. Evans.
So anyway, I may be an easy marker, but the mere fact that we show growth and progress in light of our current situation and educational model, I'm just floored by it. You guys have all worked across the board very hard to make sure our students are still attending and getting educated and making progress in spite of all the obstacles thrown in front of you. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Evans. Any other comments from any board members? Again, any administrators? Hearing none, I would just like to thank all of you for your dedication and for coming on tonight. We do appreciate it. And as Mr. Evans said, with everything that's going on, we're still making strides, forward, where I'm sure there's so many districts that are either flatlined or going the opposite way. So I've always said this, and I always believe it. Interboro is an example. We are showing these other districts how to do it the right way. And that's because of you guys. And we appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps.
All right. If there's no other questions, then the meeting is adjourned. And we will see you the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody.